I was officially dead for 28 years. My own daughter grew up believing I was a worthless alcoholic who abandoned her. But when her wealthy fiancé's family Googled my name before the wedding, they discovered something impossible: my obituary from 1996, and evidence that I'm still alive. Now I sit alone in an empty church, surrounded by abandoned wedding flowers, holding an envelope that contains the truth I've hidden for 3 decades. The truth about the children I saved, the dangerous men who wanted me silenced, and the ultimate sacrifice a father made to keep his baby daughter alive. She told me I was too poor to walk her down the aisle, but poverty wasn't my real crime. Love was. If you've ever wondered how far you would go to protect someone you love, this is a story that will break your heart and then slowly piece it back together. Follow our channel for more emotional true stories that will change how you see the world. Like and comment below to let us know where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another life-changing story. I was sitting on the last pew of the church, trembling with the inheritance envelope clutched between my weathered hands. Up front, where my daughter should have been standing in white, there was only the florist dismantling the chairs. The flowers still released their perfume, as if unaware of the tragedy. She had asked me not to come, said my old suit and simple presence would ruin the ceremony's aesthetics. The groom, the guests, even the photographers had already left. The wedding had been canceled, and it wasn't because of me. Days before, the groom's parents decided to check out the bride's family, as they put it. A simple internet search, her name, then mine, and that's when they found something impossible. An obituary, my name, my photo, my story, declared dead. And that's what scared everyone there, including my daughter, who cried in shame without even understanding what had happened. She thought I had forged it all for media attention. She had no idea what I'd been hiding for 30 years. And in a way, it was true. I was already dead, just not in the way they imagined. I still remember the look in her eyes when she called me that morning. Her voice cracked like thin ice over a frozen pond. "Dad, the wedding's off," she said, and I could hear her mascara running through her tears. "Brandon's family they found you're supposed to be dead. What kind of sick game are you playing?" I wanted to tell her everything right there. About the children I saved. About the men who wanted me silenced. About how her grandmother raised her to believe I was nothing but a deadbeat drunk who abandoned them both. But 30 years of silence is a hard habit to break. "Summer, honey," I whispered, my voice sounding foreign even to myself. "I can explain everything." "Save it," she spat. "Just don't come tomorrow. The venue's still booked. I need to say goodbye to what could have been." But I went anyway. Slipped in the back after everyone left. I needed to see the aftermath of my life's greatest sacrifice. The white roses wilting. The untouched champagne glasses. The programs with both their names still stacked neatly by the door. And that's when I saw it. Her veil, abandoned on the altar steps. Left behind like me. I walked slowly down the aisle, each step heavier than the last. This should have been our moment. The one where I finally got to walk arm in arm with the little girl I gave up everything to protect. Instead, I was alone in an empty church, picking up the pieces of a dream that never had a chance. As I reached for her veil, I noticed a small envelope tucked underneath. My name, my real name, not the one I'd been using for decades, was written in her perfect handwriting. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was a yellowed newspaper clipping, my obituary, and scrawled across it in angry red ink, "Why didn't you just stay dead?" The church door creaked behind me. I didn't need to turn to know who it was. Her perfume, the same one her mother used to wear, filled the space between us. "I Googled you," Summer said, her voice hollow. "Not just the obituary, everything." I clutched the envelope tighter. "And? The newspaper said you died in an explosion, a workplace accident." Her heels clicked against the marble floor as she moved closer. But there was something else. An FBI case file, partially redacted. Your name was mentioned alongside child trafficking victims. My heart stopped. The file was supposed to have been sealed forever. That had been the deal. "What did you do, Dad?" Her voice broke on that last word. "What was so terrible that you had to fake your death and abandon your own daughter?" I turned to face her, really face her, for the first time in 30 years. She looked so much like her mother it physically hurt. Those same determined eyes, that same stubborn chin. "I didn't abandon you," I said quietly. I saved you, and 16 other children who would have disappeared forever. Her mascara-streaked face hardened. Prove it. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the envelope I'd carried for decades, the one I'd prepared in case this day ever came. Inside was everything. The FBI documents, the threats against my family, the deal I made to disappear forever. Your grandmother knew, I admitted. She agreed to raise you if I stayed away to keep you safe. Summer's perfectly manicured hands shook as she took the envelope. Brandon's family says they can't marry into whatever this is. They're afraid of scandal. Her voice dropped to a whisper. They think you're some kind of criminal. I laughed then. A hollow, broken sound that echoed in the empty church. The truth is much worse, honey. I was a hero, and heroes don't get happy endings. She didn't open the envelope. Instead, she placed it on the altar beside her abandoned veil. I don't know if I believe you, she said, her voice steady despite the tears. But I'm going to read this, and then we'll talk. As she walked away, her white dress catching the light streaming through the stained glass windows, I realized that perhaps I wasn't as dead as I thought. Perhaps after 30 years of darkness, there might still be a chance for resurrection. Back when I died, my daughter was still in diapers. I worked as a forklift operator in a warehouse in rural Georgia. It was a dirty place, but it functioned as a front for something much dirtier, a depot for trafficked children. I didn't know at first, but I discovered it by accident. The first time I heard the screams behind the false wall, I thought it was all in my head. But I saw the children. I saw everything, and I reported it. The police arrived too late. Many escaped. Those who stayed wanted my head. An honest detective, the only one who wasn't bought, told me, if you want to protect your daughter, die. Now. They gave me a new identity, a new state, and a warning. Never contact anyone who could be traced back to you. My mother-in-law, who hated me, raised my daughter as if I were an alcoholic vagrant. I accepted it, because she would be alive. And that's how I signed my own obituary. Literally. That last day as myself still haunts me like a fever dream. The detective, Malone was his name, had a face like crumpled paper and eyes that had seen too much. He drove me to a motel off Highway 85, a place so forgotten even the roaches had abandoned it. They know you saw the ledger, he said, lighting a cigarette with trembling hands. They know you made copies. I remember how the sweat trickled down my back despite the air conditioning blasting frigid air. How much time do I have? Malone's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. They found your address this morning. My heart nearly stopped. Summer, my baby. Your mother-in-law picked her up from daycare an hour ago. She's safe. He handed me a manila envelope. Inside is your new life. Memorize it. Become it. Raymond Wilson is dead as of 9 p.m. tonight. I opened the envelope with numb fingers. Inside was a driver's license with my face but a stranger's name, Ray Hale. There was also $5,000 in cash, a Greyhound ticket to Wilmington, North Carolina, and a death certificate waiting to be filed. What about the men I saw, the children? My voice cracked. Malone's face hardened. We'll get them, but you've got to disappear. These people, they've got judges in their pockets, cops on their payroll. They erased evidence before, they'll do it again. And my daughter? The words felt like glass in my throat. Your mother-in-law hates you enough to make your absence believable. She's agreed to tell Summer you abandoned her, that you were a drunk who couldn't handle fatherhood. I punched the car seat so hard my knuckles split. That's not true, I love my daughter. Malone didn't flinch, which is why you're going to let her believe that lie. It's the only way to keep her safe. That night, I died in a gas explosion at the warehouse. The body they found was unrecognizable. Some poor homeless man with my general build. Dental records were swapped. Evidence was planted. And Raymond Wilson, loving father, hardworking man, and accidental witness, ceased to exist. I spent that first night as Ray Hale on a Greyhound bus heading northeast, sobbing silently into a jacket that still smelled like my old life. The elderly woman next to me patted my hand once and said, "Whatever you're running from, son, I hope you find peace." I never did. Wilmington became my prison and my sanctuary. I rented a dingy basement apartment that smelled of mildew and old dreams. Got a job as a janitor at an elementary school where nobody asked questions and nobody looked too close at my paperwork. I grew a beard, let my hair go gray before its time, became invisible, but I never stopped watching over Summer from afar. Every birthday, I'd drive the 8 hours back to Georgia, just to catch a glimpse of her growing up. I saw her lose her first tooth, win a spelling bee in 3rd grade, score the winning goal in her middle school soccer championship. I was there, always at a distance, always in disguise, a baseball cap pulled low, sunglasses even in the rain, a father without the right to his daughter's life. Her grandmother filled her head with stories about me. I heard Summer tell a friend once that her father was a mean drunk who left because he couldn't handle responsibility. The words cut deeper than any knife, but I let her believe it. Because a father who abandoned you was better than a father whose enemies might still be looking for revenge. On her 16th birthday, I almost broke. I watched from my car as boys brought her corsages and her grandmother took photos on the front lawn before prom. Summer looked so much like her mother, the same chestnut hair, the same dimple when she smiled, that I physically ached with the need to hold her, to tell her how proud I was, to beg her forgiveness. Instead, I left a small white rose on her windshield with a note that simply said, "You are loved." No signature, nothing that could be traced. Just a reminder that somewhere, someone was watching over her. She found it, looked around, confused, then tucked it into her purse before driving away. It was the closest I'd come to being her father in 15 years. And yet, as I drove back to my empty apartment in Wilmington, I wondered if Malone had been right, if my sacrifice had been worth it, if she wouldn't have been better off with a father, even a hunted one, than with the ghost I'd become. I didn't know then that fate would soon force my hand, that the careful walls I'd built between my old life and my new one were about to come crashing down, and that my daughter would discover the truth in the worst possible way. Over time, I settled in Wilmington, North Carolina. I worked as a janitor, then a gardener, always in the shadows. But I never stopped watching from afar. I created a ritual. On each of her birthdays, I would leave a white flower at her school door. A small gesture, but one that kept me alive. She grew up thinking her father was a mistake from the past, and gradually she stopped asking questions about me, until she stopped caring altogether. When she was accepted to university, I went there as a volunteer for a foster parents project, just to see her. She treated me with kindness, not knowing who I was. She asked my name. I froze, said Ray, the name they gave me when I erased the old one. She smiled but forgot me the same day. I treasured that smile for years. The most painful part was knowing that, despite all the sacrifices I made, she grew up believing a disgusting version of me. And that, in a way, I helped create it. My apartment in Wilmington became a shrine to her life. One wall was covered with newspaper clippings from her high school graduation, her college acceptance, any mention of her name I could find. I had a calendar where I marked her important dates in red: final exams, summer breaks, the academic conference where she presented her first research paper. I wasn't stalking my daughter. I was desperately trying to participate in a life I'd been exiled from. The foster parent volunteer program at her university was my most daring move. I'd seen an ad in the local paper, "Be a support system for students away from home." My hands trembled as I filled out the application. For the first time in almost 20 years, I had to create a believable backstory that could withstand light scrutiny. I became Ray Hale, retired landscaper, widower with no children of my own, looking to give back to the community. The day I walked onto that campus, my heart hammered so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. The quad was filled with students lounging on the grass, throwing frisbees, laughing with the easy confidence of youth. I scanned every face looking for her, and then there she was. Summer stood outside the Sciences building, a stack of books clutched to her chest, her chestnut hair caught in the autumn breeze. She looked so much like her mother it stole my breath. The same determined set to her jaw, the same graceful way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating. I almost turned and ran. What right did I have to insert myself into her life? What if she somehow recognized me? What if she hated me? But 20 years of longing propelled me forward. "Excuse me," I said, my voice rougher than I intended. "I'm with the foster parent program. Could you point me toward the administration building?" She looked up, her eyes, my eyes, meeting mine with polite disinterest. No recognition, no spark, just the kind of helpful smile you'd give any stranger. "Sure," she said. "It's that red brick building over there." She pointed, and I noticed she wore a small silver bracelet I'd never seen before. A gift from her grandmother? A boyfriend? "Thanks," I managed. "I'm Ray, by the way." "Summer," she replied. and hearing her say her own name nearly broke me. "Are you new to the program?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. Up close, I could see the tiny freckle near her left eye that she'd had since birth, the way her smile tilted slightly higher on the right side. Details a stranger would never notice. Details only a father would know. "Well, good luck," she said, already turning away, already forgetting me. "The students really appreciate it." "Wait," I blurted, desperation making me reckless. Do you have family nearby?" She paused, looking mildly confused by my interest. "My grandmother, back in Georgia." "That's it. No father." The words slipped out before I could stop them. Something shuddered in her expression. "He left when I was a baby. Died in an accident a few years later." She shrugged as if discussing a stranger. "Honestly, it's no great loss. He was a drunk, couldn't keep a job. Grandmother says I'm better off without him." Each word was a knife to my heart. Is that what Margaret had told her? That I couldn't keep a job? That I was some worthless alcoholic who'd abandoned my family? The unfairness of it burned like acid. I wanted to grab her shoulders, to tell her the truth, that I'd given up everything. My name, my life, my right to watch her grow, all to keep her safe. That I'd worked honest jobs, stayed sober, lived like a monk, all while her grandmother poisoned her against me. Instead, I just nodded. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Don't be," she said with that same dismissive shrug. "Can't miss what you never had, right?" She walked away then, her steps light and purposeful, completely unaware that she'd just driven a stake through her father's heart. I volunteered at that university for 2 semesters. Sometimes I'd see her across the quad or in the library. Once I was assigned to a career counseling session that she attended. I sat in the back, silent, watching her raise her hand to ask insightful questions about medical school applications. My daughter wanted to be a doctor, a healer, and I hadn't known. The last time I saw her on campus, she was with a young man. Tall, well-dressed, with the confident air of old money. He had his arm around her waist and she was looking up at him with an expression of such open adoration that I had to look away. She was happy, moving forward, building a life that had no space for ghosts from the past. I didn't renew my volunteer position after that. It was too painful, being so close yet unable to bridge the gulf between us. Better to watch from a distance again. Better to be the unknown guardian than the awkward stranger who asked too many personal questions. But I kept the ritual of the white flower. Every birthday without fail. A silent promise that she was not alone. That she was loved, even if she didn't know by whom. And all the while I never suspected that fate was setting the stage for our worlds to collide in the most devastating way possible. That the lies told to protect her would become the very thing that would shatter her happiness. And that the father she thought was a worthless drunk would soon be the only one who could put the pieces back together. The wedding came as dry news in the town paper. Summer and Brandon's wedding. Families unite in grand gala event. Her last name printed next to a wealthy Texas family. And my name? None. I was invited out of politeness. The invitation read, "Please do not wear casual attire. Ceremony will be streamed for VIP guests." I laughed to myself. Even in hiding, I felt proud. I bought a used suit, shaved my beard. I called her and said, "If you want, I can walk you down the aisle." The response was silence. Then, "You're too poor, Ray. Please, don't come." She used my fake name, as if she'd never had a father. It hurt, but I said I wouldn't go. But what happened the next day truly broke me. The groom's parents ordered everything suspended. When she asked why, they showed her the obituary. A digital newspaper from 1996 with my pale face printed and the headline, "Father of newborn dies in suspicious explosion case archived." And alongside it, an image of me, with another name, in a federal complaint. The local Wilmington Gazette sat untouched on my kitchen table that morning, coffee growing cold beside it. I'd been staring at the announcement for nearly an hour, reading and rereading the flowing script as if it might suddenly reveal new information. Dr. Summer Wilson and Mr. Brandon Harrington III cordially announced their upcoming nuptials at St. Augustine's Episcopal Church on March 15th, reception to follow at the Grand View Hotel. There was a small photo of them, Summer radiant in a casual sundress, the tall young man I'd seen years ago on campus beaming beside her, his arm possessively wrapped around her waist. He'd grown a neatly trimmed beard since then, and there was something in his eyes I couldn't quite place. Pride? Arrogance? Perhaps both. What struck me most was the final line. The bride, a pediatric resident at Memorial Hospital, will be given away by family friend Charles Thompson. Charles Thompson. I didn't know the name, but it stung nonetheless. Some stranger would walk my daughter down the aisle while I watched from the shadows. Another man would take the place that should have been mine. I folded the paper carefully and placed it in the drawer with all the other clippings I'd saved over the years. 28 years of watching my daughter grow up through the clinical distance of newspaper announcements and secondhand stories. The invitation arrived a week later. Thick cream cardstock with gold embossing, addressed to Mr. Ray Hale. Not Summer's father. Not even Raymond Wilson. Just the identity I'd been forced to assume. The stranger I'd become. Inside was a handwritten note. Ray, grandmother insisted I invite you since you've been so kind over the years. The ceremony is private. VIP guests will be seated in the main sanctuary. Other guests can watch from the parish hall via livestream. Please don't make a scene. Summer. I read those words until they blurred before my eyes. Please don't make a scene. As if I was some distant relation who might embarrass her with drunken toasts or inappropriate stories. As if I hadn't sacrificed my entire existence for her safety. I hadn't spoken to Summer directly in years. Not since those brief encounters at the university. Our relationship, if you could call it that, consisted mainly of the occasional phone call on holidays. Formal, distant exchanges that never scratched the surface of who we really were to each other. She knew me only as Ray Hale, the kindly older man who'd been a volunteer at her college and had somehow stayed in touch. A father figure perhaps, but never her father. The irony was almost too cruel to bear. Still, something compelled me to pick up the phone that evening. Maybe it was the whiskey I'd allowed myself. A rare indulgence. Maybe it was 28 years of silence finally becoming too heavy to carry. Whatever the reason, I dialed her number before I could talk myself out of it. She answered on the third ring, her voice distracted. Hello? Summer, it's Ray. The name still felt foreign in my mouth even after all these years. Oh, I could hear the shift in her tone, the slight cooling. Hi, Ray. Did you get the invitation? I did, I said, my heart pounding so hard I wondered if she could hear it through the phone. Thank you for including me. Like I said, it was grandmother's idea. Papers rustled in the background. Look, I'm kind of busy with hospital charts right now. I could walk you, I blurted before she could hang up. Down the aisle, I mean. The silence that followed seemed endless. What? Her voice had dropped to a near whisper. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles whitened. I know your grandmother's getting older, and you mentioned once that you don't really have any close male relatives. I thought, if you needed someone. Ray. The coldness in her voice stopped me cold. You're too poor. Your suit, your car. Brandon's family is very particular about appearances. I could get a new suit, I said desperately, hating the pleading note in my voice. It's not just that. She sighed, a sound so weary it seemed to carry the weight of all my failures. Look, I appreciate what you're trying to do. You've been kind to me over the years, but you're not my father. Those 5 words, you're not my father, cut deeper than any knife. Of course, I managed. I'm sorry for overstepping. It's fine, she said, her voice already distant again. But please, it would be better if you didn't come at all. Things are complicated enough with the Harringtons. They're very concerned with family background and social standing. After we hung up, I sat in my darkened apartment for hours, the phone still clutched in my hand. I'd known, of course, that this day would come, that Summer would build a life that had no place for me in it. But knowing it and experiencing it were 2 very different kinds of pain. The next morning, my phone rang at 6:17 a.m. Summer's name flashed on the screen. My heart leapt. Perhaps she'd had a change of heart? But when I answered, the voice on the other end was barely recognizable as my daughter's. They canceled everything, she sobbed. The Harringtons, Brandon's parents. They called off the wedding. They said, they found... Her words dissolved into incoherent crying. Summer, slow down, I said, already reaching for my car keys. What happened? They did a background check on my family. She hiccuped. Found an obituary for Raymond Wilson. My father. Said he died in 1996. But then they found Ray Hale, with your face, in an FBI document about child trafficking. They think They think you're some kind of criminal using a false identity, that there's something wrong with our family. The room seemed to tilt beneath my feet. After all these years, all these precautions, my past had finally caught up with me. And worse, it had caught up with Summer. "Where are you?" I asked, my voice steady despite the panic rising in my chest. "Home," she whispered. "Brandon won't answer my calls. His mother said they can't associate with whatever this is." A fresh wave of sobs. "What have you done, Ray? Who are you really?" The moment I'd dreaded for 28 years had finally arrived, and I had no choice but to face it head on. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said. "And Summer? I'm going to tell you everything." Summer came to me like never before. Desperate. Hysterical. "Why did you lie? Why did you fake your death? Why did this surface now?" She didn't want answers. She wanted someone to blame. Said I had ruined the best day of her life, and that she regretted letting me get close again. I almost told her everything right then, but I hesitated, because part of me didn't want to destroy the image she had of her grandmother, nor the version she had built of her own story. I had already taken so much from her that I didn't want to take more. But the cliff range was set, and when the groom definitely canceled the wedding, fearing scandal, she disappeared. It was a neighbor who told me that Summer had tried to throw herself into the neighborhood lake. The groom didn't come back. The in-laws vanished. She was left alone, and I, for the first time, wondered if protecting my daughter had really been the right thing. I drove to Summer's apartment in a daze, my old pickup truck rumbling through early morning streets still shrouded in mist. Each mile marker was another memory, another reminder of the years we'd lost. I'd rehearsed this moment countless times in my mind, imagined every possible scenario, but now that it was happening, I felt utterly unprepared. Her apartment complex was one of those modern buildings with clean lines and large windows that seemed to reflect the gray sky like a mirror, the kind of place a successful young doctor would live, the kind of place I could never afford on a gardener's salary. I parked my rusted truck between a gleaming BMW and a Mercedes SUV, feeling more out of place than ever. Summer answered the door on my first knock, as if she'd been standing just behind it, waiting. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her normally immaculate hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore an oversized Emory University sweatshirt and pajama pants with cartoon stethoscopes on them. She looked so young, so vulnerable, that my heart contracted painfully in my chest. "You'd better come in," she said flatly, turning away without meeting my eyes. I followed her into a living room that showed signs of recent chaos. Tissues strewn across the coffee table, a shattered wine glass in the corner, a pile of wedding magazines knocked to the floor. A photo of Summer and Brandon in happier times lay face down on the mantel. She sank onto the couch, pulling her knees up to her chest like a child. "Start talking," she said, "and don't lie to me. Not anymore." I remained standing, my hands fidgeting awkwardly at my sides. Where to begin? How to compress 28 years of secrecy, sacrifice, and silent guardianship into words she could understand? "My real name is Raymond Wilson," I said finally. "I was born in Savannah, moved to Atlanta after high school, met your mother at a community college where I was studying business administration." Her eyes widened slightly. Perhaps her grandmother had never shared these details. "We got married when she got pregnant with you, rented a little house in the suburbs. I took a job at a warehouse to make ends meet while finishing my degree." The memories flooded back, bittersweet and sharp. "We were happy, Summer, the three of us, for a little while." She shook her head, her expression hardening. "If we were so happy, why did grandmother tell me you walked out? That you were a drunk who couldn't handle responsibility?" The familiar anger flared, but I tamped it down. "Margaret never liked me. Thought your mother could have done better. When everything happened, she was happy to paint me as the villain." "What happened?" Summer demanded. "What was so terrible that you had to fake your own death?" I took a deep breath. This was the moment, the point of no return. I discovered something at the warehouse, something illegal. Children were being trafficked through the facility, hidden in shipping containers. I found evidence, made copies, went to the police. The words sounded hollow, inadequate to describe the horror of what I'd seen. Summer's face paled. "The FBI document the Harringtons found." I nodded. I was a witness, one of the only ones willing to testify. But these people, they had connections, high-up connections. They found out who I was, where I lived. My voice broke. "They threatened you and your mother. Her eyes were wide now, disbelief warring with the first glimmers of understanding. A detective, a good one, warned me that they were coming. Said the only way to keep you safe was to disappear completely. Make them think I was dead so they'd have no reason to come after my family. I swallowed hard. Your mother had already passed away from pneumonia the year before. It was just you and me. So you just left me? Her voice was small, wounded. I made a deal with your grandmother, I said, the words ashy in my mouth. She agreed to raise you if I stayed away completely. No contact, no support that could be traced, nothing that would put you at risk. And she told me you abandoned us, Summer whispered, that you were worthless, a failure. I couldn't stop the bitter laugh that escaped me. Margaret always did know how to twist the knife. Summer stood suddenly, crossing to the window. Her back to me, shoulders rigid, she asked, "Why should I believe any of this? You've been lying to me for years, pretending to be someone else, because I never stopped watching over you," I said quietly. "The white flowers on your birthday? That was me. Every year." She turned, her eyes widening. "That was you?" I nodded. I couldn't stay away completely. I needed to see that you were okay, that you were happy. I was there at your high school graduation, hiding in the back. At your soccer championships, when you got your white coat at the medical school ceremony. My entire life has been a lie," she whispered, wrapping her arms around herself as if trying to hold the pieces together. "Everything I thought I knew about myself, about my family. I'm so sorry, Summer," I said, taking a step toward her. "I never wanted—" "Stop." She held up her hand, her expression suddenly fierce. "Don't come any closer." I froze, heart hammering painfully against my ribs. "I need proof," she said, her doctor's mind asserting itself through the emotional chaos. "Documents, evidence, something that proves what you're saying is true." Before I could respond, her phone buzzed loudly on the coffee table. She glanced at it, her face crumpling as she read the message. "Brandon?" I guessed. She nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "He says his parents have hired a private investigator to look into our family. They're concerned about protecting the Harrington reputation." Her voice cracked on the last words. "He says we need to take a break until things are cleared up." "I'm so sorry," I said helplessly. "This is all my fault." "No." Summer's voice was suddenly, surprisingly steady. "This is Brandon's fault. If he really loved me, he'd stand by me through this." She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "But I still need to understand what's happening. Who you really are." I nodded, reaching slowly for my wallet. I removed a worn business card, Detective Malone's contact information, preserved for nearly 3 decades. "This is the detective who helped me disappear," I said, placing it on the coffee table between us. "He retired years ago, but he's still alive. He can verify everything I've told you." Summer stared at the card as if it might bite her. "Is that all? A business card?" "No," I admitted. "There's more, but it's not here. It's in a safe deposit box in Wilmington. Everything I've saved over the years, the original documents, newspaper clippings, photos of you growing up, all the pieces of your life I collected from a distance." She was silent for a long moment, processing. Then she grabbed her car keys from the counter. "Show me," she said simply. As we drove toward the bank, Summer stared out the window, her profile etched with tension. We hadn't made it 3 blocks before her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, flagged us down, her elderly face pinched with concern. "Summer, dear, I've been trying to call you," she exclaimed, hurrying toward the truck with surprising speed for a woman in her 70s. "I was walking Muffin by the lake this morning when I saw—" She broke off, glancing uncomfortably at me. "It's okay, Mrs. Patterson," Summer said wearily. "You can talk in front of Ray." "Well, I saw you down by the water," the older woman continued hesitantly. "You were standing so close to the edge, in your wedding dress." I called out, but you didn't seem to hear me. She reached through the window to squeeze Summer's hand. "I was so worried, dear. I almost called the police." Summer's face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm sorry I frightened you. I needed some air." As Mrs. Patterson retreated, murmuring sympathetic words about wedding jitters, I turned to my daughter in alarm. "Summer," I said carefully. "Were you thinking of—" "I wasn't going to jump," she interrupted, her voice flat. "I just wanted to feel something. Anything besides this emptiness." She turned to face me, her eyes hollow. "Do you know what it's like to have your entire identity ripped away in an instant?
And there it was, the terrible irony. The very thing I'd done to protect her had left her as adrift and lost as I'd been all those years ago. Yes, I said quietly. I do know. Exactly.
It was during this time that I reconnected with the detective who had helped me in the past. He was retired, sick, but still lucid. They erased you, but they didn't erase what you did, he said. Then he showed me what remained of the case. Names of influential men, hidden evidence, and a dossier with my signature. He had kept everything secret for 30 years. He asked me a question that turned my soul inside out. Do you want your daughter to know the truth? Or do you want to continue being the invisible monster in her life? That's when I decided to write my will and tell everything. But as I wrote, I discovered something I didn't expect. She was pregnant, and the name she would give the baby was the same as the father she never knew. The real name. Mine. The safe deposit box at Wilmington First National Bank contained my entire life, or at least the shadow life I'd lived for nearly 3 decades. As the bank manager turned the key and left us alone in the private viewing room, I felt a strange vertigo, as if standing at the edge of a precipice I'd been approaching my entire adult life. Summer stood beside me, arms crossed protectively over her chest, her face deliberately impassive. "Open it," she said. My fingers trembled slightly as I lifted the lid. Inside lay the careful documentation of my years of exile, newspaper clippings, photographs taken from a distance, report cards I'd somehow obtained, programs from her piano recitals and school plays, an entire childhood preserved by a father who could only love from afar. But beneath those mementos lay something else, a sealed manila envelope, edges yellowed with age, with "In the event of my death" written across the front in faded blue ink. "What's that?" Summer asked, her clinical detachment slipping just enough to reveal curiosity. "Insurance," I said quietly, removing the envelope. "Detective Malone helped me prepare this years ago, in case the men who wanted me silenced ever found me. Or in case," I hesitated, then finished honestly, "in case I ever needed to prove to you who I really was." Summer's eyes widened slightly, but she said nothing as I broke the seal and removed the contents. An original copy of my death certificate, the police report detailing the warehouse explosion, documents from the FBI's investigation into the trafficking ring, and finally, a handwritten letter addressed to Summer Wilson. "This is your proof," I said, pushing the pile toward her. "Everything I told you. Everything I've been hiding." She hesitated for only a moment before pulling up a chair and beginning to read, her doctor's eyes methodically scanning each document with clinical precision. I remained standing, too restless to sit, watching emotions flicker across her face. Disbelief, shock, growing horror as she absorbed the truth of my past. "These children," she whispered, looking up from a particularly detailed FBI report. "They were so young." I nodded, my throat tight. "The youngest was 4. They were being shipped like cargo." She continued reading, her hands occasionally trembling when she turned a page. When she finally reached the handwritten letter, her composure faltered. "This is addressed to me. I wrote it when you were 5, I explained. Updated it every few years in case something happened to me before I could explain." Summer unfolded the pages slowly, as if they might crumble in her hands. As she read, tears began to slide silently down her cheeks. I turned away, giving her privacy with my most intimate confessions. My love for her, my agony at our separation, my pride in watching her grow into a remarkable woman from a distance. After what seemed like hours, she carefully refolded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "You did all this to protect me." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Yes, and grandmother knew. The whole time." "She did," I confirmed, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "She agreed it was safer for you, but she didn't have to poison you against me. That was her choice." Summer stood abruptly, pacing the small room. "I don't know how to feel," she admitted. "Part of me wants to hug you. Part of me wants to scream at you for not finding another way." Her eyes met mine, red-rimmed but clear. "I've spent my whole life believing a lie. I'm sorry," I said, the words hopelessly inadequate. "If I could go back—" "You'd do it all again," she interrupted, "to keep me safe. I understand that now." We left the bank in silence. each lost in our own thoughts. The gray morning had given way to weak sunshine that seemed to mock the heaviness between us. As we approached my truck, Summer suddenly stopped. "I need some time," she said, "to process all this, to figure out what it means for everything." I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. "Of course, whatever you need." She hesitated, then asked, "That detective Malone, is he still alive?" "Last I heard," I said, "though it's been a few years since we've spoken. He retired to Asheville." "I want to talk to him," she said decisively, "to hear his side of the story." "I'll find him," I promised. We parted ways there in the bank parking lot, me to my lonely apartment, her to the life that had been built on foundations now revealed to be sand. I spent the evening calling old contacts, leaving messages, searching for Malone. Finally, well past midnight, my phone rang. "Wilson?" The voice was thinner than I remembered, roughened by age and illness, but unmistakably his. "Didn't expect to hear from you after all these years." "Hello, detective," I said, relief washing through me. "I need your help one more time." We arranged to meet at his home in the mountains outside Asheville. I drove through the night, arriving as dawn was breaking over the Blue Ridge. Malone's house was a modest cabin set back from the road, surrounded by towering pines. As I pulled up, I saw him waiting on the porch, gaunt, oxygen tank at his side, but still possessing those sharp eyes that seemed to cut right through pretense. "You look old," he said by way of greeting. "So do you," I replied, and we shared a grim smile of recognition. Two men who had seen too much, who carried secrets that had aged them beyond their years. Inside, the cabin was spartanly furnished but meticulously clean. Photographs of Malone's grandchildren lined the mantel, the family life I had sacrificed. He settled heavily into a recliner, adjusting his oxygen tube. "So," he wheezed, "she finally found out." I nodded. "The Groom'S family discovered the obituary. Did some digging." Malone's laugh turned into a coughing fit. "Rich people," he managed finally, "always have to know everybody's business." "She wants to talk to you," I said, "to verify my story." He considered this, his gnarled fingers tapping against the armrest. "What makes you think I still have the evidence? That was 30 years ago." In answer, I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, the case number from the FBI files Summer had read at the bank. "Because you're you," I said simply, "and you never let go of an unfinished case." A slow smile spread across his weathered face. "Damn right," he admitted. "Got everything in a fireproof safe under the floorboards. Never did trust digital records." His expression grew serious. "But you know what showing her those files means, don't you? Once she sees the full extent of what those men did, what they were planning to do, she can never unknow it." I hadn't considered that. In my desperation to prove my innocence, I hadn't thought about how the horrific details of the trafficking operation might affect Summer. "Maybe we should edit them," I suggested. "Redact the worst parts." Malone shook his head firmly. "No more lies, Wilson. No more half-truths. That girl deserves the whole story, ugly as it is." He leaned forward, wincing with the effort. "And there's something else you should know. Something I never told you." My heart stuttered. "What?" "Some of them are still out there," he said quietly. "The bigger fish. The ones with real connections. Statute of limitations expired on most of the crimes, but not all." His eyes held mine. "If your daughter starts digging publicly into this case, asking questions, it could stir up old ghosts." The implication hit me like a physical blow. After all these years, all these sacrifices, could Summer still be in danger? "Do you think they would come after her?" I asked, my mouth dry with fear. Malone shrugged. "Hard to say. Some of them are respectable businessmen now, politicians, men with a lot to lose if their past associations came to light." He adjusted his oxygen flow. "But others, the real sadists, they might not appreciate the attention." As I drove back to Wilmington, Malone's warning echoed in my mind. Had I protected Summer all these years only to put her in danger now? The irony was almost too cruel to contemplate. When I arrived home, there was a message waiting on my answering machine. Summer's voice, tentative but determined. "I've been doing some research," she said. "About the case, I found some names online." There was a pause, and when she continued, her voice was lower, nervous. "Also, there's something else I need to tell you. Something important. Can you come over tomorrow morning?" I played the message twice, trying to decipher the emotion behind her words. fear, excitement. As I fell into a restless sleep that night, I wondered what new revelation awaited me, and whether our fragile reconnection would survive it. I decided to give her the envelope I had kept for years. Inside were the will, the dossier, a photo of her as a baby in my arms, and the obituary clipping. I went to her house and knocked. She opened the door, pale. She looked at me as if seeing a ghost, and I said, "This is the wedding present I never got to give you." She threw me out, threw the envelope in my face, but she didn't tear it up. Hours later, she called me, didn't say anything, just cried, and in the background, I knew. She had finally read it. 2 days later, I received an email, an attached birth certificate, father's name, Raymond Wilson, the name I thought would never be written anywhere again. Morning came too slowly, the night stretching endlessly as I tossed and turned, imagining every possible scenario that might await me at Summer's apartment. By the time I arrived at her door, clutching a cardboard carrier with 2 coffees, a peace offering of sorts, I was exhausted but wired with nervous energy. She opened the door before I could knock, as if she'd been watching for me through the peephole. Her face was drawn, with dark circles under her eyes that told me her night had been no more restful than mine. But there was something else there too, a quiet determination that reminded me painfully of her mother. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. I made breakfast. The apartment was transformed from the chaotic space I'd seen yesterday. The broken glass had been swept away, the tissues disposed of, the wedding magazines neatly stacked and pushed to one corner of the coffee table. The kitchen table was set for 2, with plates of barely touched scrambled eggs and toast. "I brought coffee," I said awkwardly, holding up the carrier. "Thanks." She took 1 cup, her fingers briefly brushing mine. "I couldn't sleep much last night." "Me neither," I admitted. We sat at the kitchen table, the morning sunlight streaming through the blinds, creating bars of light and shadow across our faces. For several minutes, neither of us spoke, the weight of 3 decades of secrets hanging between us like an invisible wall. Finally, Summer reached beneath the table and pulled out a large manila envelope, the one I'd given her, now dog-eared and wrinkled as if it had been opened and closed many times. "I read everything," she said quietly. 3 times, actually. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Then I called grandmother. Her mouth tightened. She denied it all at first. Said you were lying, that you'd always been unstable, prone to making up stories. Summer's eyes met mine, clear and direct. But when I told her I'd seen the FBI documents, the police reports, she broke down, admitted everything. "I'm sorry," I said, though I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for anymore. The deception, the years of absence, or the painful truth she now had to reconcile with her understanding of her life. "She's sorry too, in her way," Summer said with a mirthless laugh. "Says she was just trying to protect me from the pain of knowing what happened, that it was easier for me to believe you'd abandoned us than to grow up afraid." Looking over my shoulder. She might have been right about that, I conceded. Summer's hand slammed down on the table, making the dishes jump. "Stop defending her. She lied to me my entire life. Made me hate you. Made me believe I wasn't worth staying for." Her voice broke on the last words. I reached across the table instinctively, covering her hand with mine. To my surprise, she didn't pull away. "You were always worth it," I said fiercely. "Every single day, every sacrifice, it was all for you, to give you a chance at a normal life." She withdrew her hand slowly, composing herself. "I have something to show you too," she said, reaching for her phone. After scrolling for a moment, she pushed it across the table to me. On the screen was an email, a medical lab report. My eyes scanned it quickly, medical terminology jumping out. HCG levels, gestational age approximately 8 weeks, prenatal genetic screening. My head snapped up, heart suddenly pounding. "You're pregnant?" Summer nodded, a complex mix of emotions playing across her face. Vulnerability, defiance, uncertainty. "Found out the week before the wedding. Brandon doesn't know yet." "Are you going to tell him?" I asked carefully. "I don't know," she admitted. "After everything that's happened, I'm not sure I want him in my life, or my child's life." She took a deep breath. "But that's not what I wanted to show you." Scroll down. I continued reading, my eyes catching on the final section of the report. Gender, male. Below was a sticky note from Summer to herself. Potential names: Raymond. The room seemed to tilt beneath me. "You'd name him? After my father," she said simply. "My real father. Not the imaginary drunk who abandoned me, but the man who gave up everything to keep me safe." Tears blurred my vision, and I had to put the phone down carefully before I dropped it. "I don't deserve that," I managed. "Maybe not," she agreed, her voice gentle but firm. "But he deserves to know where he comes from, who his family is. The truth, not some comfortable lie." We sat in silence for a moment, the magnitude of her gesture washing over me. Then she reached into the envelope again and pulled out a folded piece of paper I didn't recognize. "I did some research last night," she said, her tone shifting to something more businesslike. "About the case, the men involved." Alarm bells rang in my head, Malone's warning echoing in my ears. "Summer, that might not be safe. Most of them are dead," she interrupted, "or in prison for other crimes. But there are 3. She unfolded the paper, revealing a printout with 3 men's photos circled in red, who are still very much in positions of power. One's a state senator now. Another runs a tech company. The third is on the board of a children's charity, if you can believe it. My mouth went dry. "What are you planning to do with this information?" She met my gaze steadily. "I'm not sure yet, but I needed you to know that I understand now. I understand what you were up against, why you made the choices you did." She hesitated, then added, "And I think these men need to be exposed for what they are." Fear clutched at my heart. "Summer, these people are dangerous. If they find out you're looking into the case, if they find out Raymond Wilson's daughter is looking into the case," she corrected me. "The daughter of the man they thought was dead, the man whose testimony could have destroyed them." A small, fierce smile played at the corners of her mouth. "That's why I wanted you to see this." She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope, cream-colored, expensive cardstock. With trembling fingers, I opened it and withdrew a birth certificate. Not the faded original I'd kept all these years, but a brand new certified copy. And there, in black and white official text, was my name. Father, Raymond Wilson. "I filed to have my birth certificate amended," Summer explained. "Used the FBI documents and Detective Malone's statement as evidence. It was approved yesterday." Her voice softened. "I'm officially your daughter now, on paper as well as in reality." I stared at the document, unable to process what I was seeing. After decades of hiding, of erasing my identity, of being a ghost in my own daughter's life, here was proof that Raymond Wilson existed, that he had a daughter, that he had not been entirely erased from the world. "Why?" I whispered. "Because I want my child to know his grandfather's real name," she said. "And because I need to reclaim the truth. For both of us." She reached across the table again, taking my hand in hers. "I spent my whole life believing I wasn't worth staying for. You spent yours believing you had to stay away to prove your love. We both deserve better than that." In that moment, looking into my daughter's eyes so like mine, filled with the same stubborn determination, I felt something I hadn't experienced in nearly 30 years. Hope, not the cautious, meager hope that had sustained me through decades of exile, but something bold and bright and powerful. "What happens now?" I asked. Summer squeezed my hand. "Now we stop hiding. Both of us." She took a deep breath. "I want you to help me write a letter to Brandon, to explain everything, and then I think we should pay Detective Malone another visit." "Why?" Her expression hardened with resolve. "Because those men destroyed your life. They took you away from me, and I'm not going to let them get away with it anymore." She placed a protective hand over her still flat stomach. "Not when there's another generation at stake." As I looked at my daughter, fierce, determined, unafraid to face the truth no matter how painful, I saw not just the child I had sacrificed everything for, but the remarkable woman she had become in spite of, or perhaps because of, that sacrifice. And for the first time in 30 years, I allowed myself to believe that perhaps my story wasn't finished after all. That maybe, just maybe, there might still be a chance for redemption, for healing, for the family that had been stolen from us so long ago. She never apologized to me, and I never said I forgave her. But one day, with the baby in her arms, she called me Dad for the first time, not in an emotional tone, just natural, as if time had decided to correct the errors that life imposed. I didn't become a grandfather at parties or Christmas dinners, but I was called to pick up the boy from school, take him to the playground, watch him sleep, She asked me why I never told her the truth before, and I just replied, because loving is also being silent. She didn't understand immediately, but I think when she held her son in her arms for the first time, she understood. Today, my name still appears on Google, but not in the obituary. It's on a forum for parents who gave up everything they had to protect what truly mattered. And if you ask Summer, perhaps she won't say I'm a hero, but with luck, she'll say I'm her father. 6 months passed like a dream, a beautiful, impossible dream I never thought I'd live to see. The seasons changed, turning Wilmington's trees from the vibrant green of late spring to the fiery reds and golds of autumn. And with each passing week, Summer's belly grew rounder, her face softer, her eyes brighter with anticipation. We never did confront those men, the ones who had stolen my life and nearly destroyed our family. After visiting Detective Malone a second time, hearing his warnings, seeing the fear still etched in his face after all these years, Summer had reluctantly agreed to let sleeping dogs lie, at least for now, at least until the baby was born. They've lived with their secrets for 30 years, she'd said, cradling her growing bump protectively. They can live with them a little longer. Instead, we focused on rebuilding what we'd lost, the precious, ordinary moments of family life that had been denied us for so long. I helped Summer paint the nursery a soft blue in her apartment. We assembled the crib together, laughing at the incomprehensible instructions. I drove her to doctor's appointments and held her hand during ultrasounds, watching in awe as my grandson, kicked and squirmed on the grainy screen. Brandon faded from our lives like a ghost, sending occasional texts to check on the situation, but never quite finding the courage to face the complicated truth of who we were. Summer's relief was palpable. She'd outgrown him, she told me one evening as we sorted through tiny baby clothes. He wanted a convenient wife with a spotless family background, she'd said, folding a miniature pair of overalls with practiced precision. I need someone who understands that love means sacrifice, that family is complicated and messy and worth fighting for. Her grandmother was another story. Margaret had retreated into a defensive shell of denial and self-justification. She'd sent cards for the baby shower but declined to attend, called on holidays but kept the conversations brief and superficial. The wound between them was deep, festering with decades of lies and manipulation. I didn't push Summer to forgive her. Some bridges, once burned, can never be fully rebuilt. Little Raymond arrived on a crisp October morning after 18 hours of labor. I paced the hospital waiting room the entire time, too nervous to sit, too afraid to hope that this miracle, this second chance at family, wouldn't somehow be snatched away at the last moment. When the nurse finally called my name, I followed her on shaky legs to Summer's room. My daughter lay propped against white pillows, exhausted but radiant, a tiny bundle cradled in her arms. She looked up as I entered, and her tired smile nearly brought me to my knees. "Dad," she said, that simple word still new and precious between us. "Come meet your grandson." I approached the bed cautiously, irrationally afraid that if I moved too quickly, the scene before me might dissolve like morning mist. Summer shifted the blanket to reveal a perfect, tiny face, red and wrinkled and topped with a surprising amount of dark hair. "Would you like to hold him?" she asked. My hands trembled as she passed me the bundle. He weighed almost nothing, this new life, this continuation of our family line. As I cradled him against my chest, his eyes fluttered open, unfocused, newborn blue, but already holding a hint of the Wilson stubbornness. "Hello, Raymond," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I'm your grandpa." The next few months passed in a blur of midnight feedings, diaper changes, and the magical, mundane rhythms of life with a newborn. I moved into Summer's spare bedroom, temporarily, though we both knew there was nothing temporary about it. I had lost 30 years with my daughter. I wasn't about to miss a single day with my grandson. We settled into a comfortable routine. Summer returned to work at the hospital part-time. I cared for little Ray during her shifts, discovering a talent for baby whispering I never knew I possessed. We took turns walking the floors at night when he was colicky, tag-teaming the exhaustion of new parenthood with good-humored resignation. We never discussed it formally, but somewhere along the way, Summer stopped calling me Ray and started calling me Dad. Not in a dramatic moment of reconciliation, not with tears or fanfare. It happened naturally, organically, as if the word had simply found its rightful place in her vocabulary after decades of absence. The first time was at the pediatrician's office. "Dad, can you grab the diaper bag?" she'd asked absently, focused on filling out insurance forms. I'd frozen, the simple word hitting me like a physical blow. She hadn't even noticed the significance of what she'd said. Later, it became a regular part of our conversations. "Dad, did you remember to buy more formula?" "Hey Dad, can you watch Ray while I shower?" Each time, the word was a healing balm on the wound of our separation. We didn't become the kind of family that celebrated holidays with elaborate traditions or gathered for Sunday dinners with extended relatives. Our family was just the three of us, bound together by shared pain, shared blood, and shared redemption. It was enough. More than enough. One evening, as I rocked little Ray to sleep in the nursery, singing an off-key lullaby my own mother had once sung to me, Summer appeared in the doorway. She leaned against the frame, watching us with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" she asked softly. "Even after I was grown, even after the danger had passed? Why keep up the lie?" I considered the question, looking down at the sleeping baby in my arms. His tiny fingers were curled around my thumb, his chest rising and falling with the peaceful rhythm of innocent slumber. "Because loving is also being silent," I said finally. "Sometimes to protect someone you love, you have to carry the burden alone. You have to be the one who hurts so they don't have to." She didn't say anything, but I saw understanding dawn in her eyes, the understanding that only comes with parenthood, with holding a life so precious and vulnerable that you would sacrifice anything, everything, to keep it safe. Weeks later, as she nursed Ray in the pre-dawn darkness, she confessed that she finally understood. "I would do it," she whispered, stroking his downy head. "If I had to disappear to keep him safe, I would do it in a heartbeat, even if it meant he grew up hating me." "Let's hope it never comes to that," I said, squeezing her shoulder gently. "My name still appears on Google searches, but not just in that old obituary anymore. Now it also appears on a forum for parents who sacrificed everything for their children's safety. A support group Summer found for me, filled with stories both heartbreaking and hopeful. Last week, as I pushed little Ray on the swings at the park, a stranger asked if I was the grandfather. Before I could answer, Summer linked her arm through mine and said simply, "He's my dad. Not a hero, not a martyr, just her dad." And after 30 years of exile, of erasure, of existing as a ghost in my own life, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Some sacrifices remain invisible to the world. For nearly 30 years, I lived as a ghost in my daughter's life, watching from the shadows, leaving white flowers on birthdays, carrying the burden of truth alone so she could live without fear. I chose her safety over her love, her future over my happiness. And in the process, I discovered that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting someone believe the worst about you. What would you sacrifice for your child? Would you give up your name, your identity, your right to be loved? Would you endure decades of silent pain, knowing they were growing up believing you abandoned them? Most of us will never face such an impossible choice. But in the quiet moments when we hold our children, we understand that love sometimes demands the unthinkable. My name is Raymond Wilson. I died to save my daughter, and I lived to see her become a mother. Now when you search my name online, you'll find more than just an obituary. You'll find the story of a father who gave up everything except hope. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that even the deepest wounds can heal, and that it's never too late to reclaim the truth of who you are. Thank you for listening to my journey back from the dead.